Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Just to make you aware, this podcast may contain some explicit/offensive language, and if that's not your thing, you don't have to listen, but I have given you a warning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
You don't know the half of it, but anyway. I'm skating on the thinnest ice known to man.
He said, and they put a poison in the tank that just instantly kills them. He went, and we've run out of it, so we cut their heads off with shovels.
Suddenly, bang! The whole boat exploded.
Take your sort of 8-inch long piranha and imagine that at 4, 5, maybe 6 feet.
I said, I've revived your dead fish. F off, he said. You haven't.
That was just humongous. It was... I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
I'm just battling this fish out in the pond. I know it's a black man. I'm saying I'll never be a naughty boy again.
If you catch fish and you return them to the water, then you are my brother.
Welcome to the podcast, Max, Hendry, and the one and only Gary Bays. How are you boys? You well?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Very good, mate. Very
busy.
good.
Not tired, Max?
Always tired, but it doesn't matter, does it?
You've been very
We're working hard, don't we? So it's good.
This was going to be my lay-in, and I had to get up at 5:30 this morning to meet a lorry to get so much dropped off at Bayswater.
I was going to say, you didn't get up at 5:30 to come here, did you, mate? I hope you didn't, bless you. But
I've been waiting on you, Hassan, the whole time.
I was back at home at 7:30.
Just do me, yeah, wouldn't I, Gary? That's why it's taking so long. Yeah. We're going to talk all things particle. Now, you boys, in terms of bait and your own angling, we're going to talk about some experiences you've had around particles. We're going to talk about, obviously, the new particle range, which we launched at the time of this podcast out. But hopefully, it'll be a bit of a guide as to some people that may use particle, may not use particle, may want some information about stuff like that, or just want to hear from your experience on the subject. For you two, particles, when I say that, talk to me about what that means in essence in terms of what kinds of baits.
Well, you want me to go first, Max?
Yeah, absolutely, mate.
To be honest, I've caught a lot on hemp, maples, tares, all sorts of things, all types of particle. I did really, really well for a spell with the red maize, the ruby maize. And so between all the different particles, what we've used, we've put some blends together, which seems to, well, not seems to, definitely seems to pick out the best for all. And it's a little bit like method fishing, where you've got some of everything there. If something comes in what's got a preference for one or the other, it's there. So you're actually sort of like covering more bases, and it definitely seems to work like that. So that's one of the reasons we've done these blends. But like I say, I've caught on all the individual ones as well. Years and years ago when I lived at Lincoln, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 40 years ago was catching on particle, and the concept of particle as well. There's lots of small things. I used to use a product called bacon grill. You can't buy it no more. If you can, it's not the same. And I used to cube it up into little tiny cubes and spread it about. And like years ago, before there was lots of big fish anywhere in Lincolnshire, I had a brace of 20s one day on it. It's just a concept of small things, and quite often spread. I like quite spread out areas. I know there's bait boat people now and they just drop it all on a big heap, but I do like that spread thing. And I just think if you've got quite a few fish in your swim, you're less likely to spook them all. They're spread out a little bit, so you can often pick up more fish. And it's just then concentrating on your hook baits and making your hook baits a little bit special and a bit different.
So, when did you first hear about particles, Gal, for you? You talked about using it 40, 50 years ago, but how did it come to light for you?
When you think about it, maggots are particle, isn't it?
Yeah, true.
It's that concept of feed. Feed. You get a few bites, you put a bit more feed in. You get a few bites, you put a bit more feed in. I've never really been one for just laying a trap and sitting and waiting. Some of the waters of fish, like Fendraton, and some of the waters with hardly any fish, you have to fish like that. But if I can, like even a couple of years ago when I was on Welly, I wanted a big fish out Welly. I caught it, and I was going to drop my ticket, but I went back for one more weekend, and I had fish coming through all the time, and I was constantly feeding. And I ended up with 3 or 4 bites fairly quick. Just because you catch one, you've only got enough food out there to catch one, you caught it, you just replace it, catch the next one, replace it. And that to me is how I like to use particle, little and often, feeding on reward as such. You get a couple of bites, put a little bit more in. And that's how I like to fish it. I have fished off massive, great big beds when I was at Murray's a few years ago. Like, there was a lot of carp in a big area, and I wanted them in a smaller area because of the weed beds and everything. You can't just cast at a carp because it was like cast until you could get a drop. And I found an area which I really thought I could catch one or two from, and so I wanted them in that area. So I did put a lot of mixed particle. I used the large mix and the small mix, and put a lot of that in. Put some liquids in with it to really boost the attraction, and I ended up with a couple of 30s rather, and I actually lost the stocky. I didn't want to catch the stocky anyway. I lost that, and I think a mid-20 as well, all off that one area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I ended up with all three.
How much did you put in? Go on, give me an idea, quantity-wise.
2 bucketfuls is about 20 kilos, about 40 kilos altogether. And there were some crush boilies in it as well, and right mixture, a little bit like I say, the method mix concept, where there's something there what each fish might want to desire.
Yeah,
might have a preference.
Max, for you, particles, quantify them for me. What like, I know there's nuts, there's seeds, there's pulse. They're all qualified as the same thing, and we talked about maggots. Personally, been categorised like that as well. For you, when did you first hear about it? How do you categorise particles? Talk to me about that.
Well, obviously, I'm a bit younger than Gary, aren't I? A little bit.
Yeah.
But
working on it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, feeling older. But we when my dad sort of fished in the 80s, and obviously the particle sort of revolution would happen around that sort of time, wouldn't it, Gary? Would you say?
Yeah.
And in that time, obviously, it was very much like home stuff. People were finding out what worked, if you like, in certain situations. And my dad actually fished local lake, really, Lake Meadows, and there it was quite well known for fishing lots of particle bait. So he sort of stepped out of fishing maybe 5 years later, and he'd obviously caught a lot on maple peas and things like that. And it almost came full circle for me, because I was learning how to carp fish, if you like, and I couldn't fish because I was below 16. I couldn't do nights without an adult, so my dad started taking me. And one day I remember he turned me royally over fishing with maple peas. He just catapulted them out, and like Gary said, feeding, and he buried it with these maples in the end. He put a big old bucket out, and it's all that lovely chocolatey brown colour you get when you cook them up. And I was fishing what I was taught, if you know what I mean, what I'd read in the magazines and videos, and I hadn't sort of understood the whole, like, the premise of particles being such a big thing for carp, and how sort of interested they get in them, or how ravenous they get on them. And he had probably caught about 5 or 6, and I don't think I caught a carp that time, and that changed me completely. And I ended up buying sacks of maple peas for months. Everywhere I went, it was either boilie and maples, or it was maple peas. But I like the fact that you can hair rig a couple of them. They look like a little 8 miller, don't they? 6 miller. They actually quite a similar sort of shape, if you like, to boilies. And that was sort of my learning curve. And then from there, obviously, it developed. You started hearing of linear fisheries and the Elstow guys fishing 3 rods on the spot and baiting very tightly with the hemp and everything like that, and the pellet. And I'd sort of say pellet kind of is a particle. It's the size, isn't it, really? It sort of denotes it being a particle. But certainly them guys doing that and sort of taking that further, especially with the spod and everything like that, being very much hugely popular by that point, and the spom and all them later on, it started becoming a very much like at the forefront. It was boilies, but it was almost like boilies and particles was your bulk, bits of sweet corn, that sort of thing. And I sort of suppose I'd learned how to do that sort of fishing, and that developed. And it's become a mainstay, really, of any fishing I do. I like putting loads of nice seeds in.
All year round?
Yeah, I think there's a time for all of it, and certainly it's not exclusive of the summer. Certain ones might be, if you know what I mean, and maybe the levels in which you feed and how you feed in terms of regularity. But I think they've got a lot of applications even in the winter,
Yeah.
Certainly oils in hemp seed, they're always very good, isn't it? Even in the cold water, disperse as well. And that sort of thing, when you're looking at your fish oils and stuff, is obviously quite a lot different, but you can apply things with hemp oil, or oily hemp, and that will sort of really disperse quite well in the cold water. So things like sweet corn, everyone knows that sweet corn, they chew it up, all the good stuff comes out the middle, and it comes out the other end and just a shell, doesn't it, basically? Yeah. But sweet corn, again, mainstay of sort of carp fishing, I suppose. But I also think your small seeds, we do a small seed mix. It's almost, as the way we cook it, it's obviously got that starchiness to it, almost like binds, doesn't it? But that sort of real softness to it means that it's just going through the fish.
Yeah.
It's going through them, and if you can get their gut moving, even in the winter, you've got more chance of catching fish or multiple fish where you would normally struggle. So,
talk me through some of the success you've had around particle approaches. It could be on different types of venues. I know, Gal, you fish from ridiculously tough venues, if you want to quantify them that way, but maybe on your sort of commercial fisheries as well. Where have you used it to good effect that's sort of memorable?
Because to be honest, like I don't fish anywhere where we get a lot of bites, really. But donkeys years ago, I used to use it on the Trent, maize.
Yeah, you were saying.
And like, you could pull fish from past a good swim into a bad swim if somebody else is in your swim. And I did that several times. I used to use it as my little weapon. A bucket full of maize, heavily flavoured with the peach oil palatin. And like, literally, is in the best swim. The bloke was nicking me swim all the time. And I'd pull the fish past him, upstream past him, and catch.
Is that because the maize is a carrier for that palatin, which is the attractive element?
Yeah, it's a bit of every single thing. Like anything you put a liquid into leaks out different. The maize and the peach oil just seem to be perfect. You don't cook it in the peach oil, you cook the maize, and then as soon as it starts to cool, then you just stir the peach oil in, and as it cools down, it swells that little bit extra, doesn't it? And that's when it seems to pull it in. I think when you try and cook it in it, it just pushes it out. A lot of some flavours not too good being treated with a constant high heat. So you're out in a boilie for a couple of minutes cooking, but like constant cooking for ages, it doesn't always work with some flavours. And the peach oil is like perfect for that. Perfect for just putting in afterwards. So yeah, that was like when I lived at Lincoln, which is like years and years ago. I lived in Essex, so well over 30 years.
Yeah.
On the A1 pit itself, caught a lot of fish on particle. Literally just walking, like there was no trees then, just walking down a bank, scooping it in as you go along, feed a big area, which is what I said about fishing the big areas, and then just, dot 3 rods, so 3 or 4 rods, or as many rods as you can carry, along their margins, whatever, and you get bites if they came in, if you just get the conditions right. Like them big pits, they do move with the conditions, especially before there was fish for heavily, the wildish carp. So the conditions say they've got to go over there, and they go over there. You don't always hold them with bait.
Yeah.
And then you have fish small waters like Maxi number 1 or whatever, where I caught lots and lots of fish on little tiny black beans. I only ever managed to get 1 sack, and I caught loads on it. And that's where maples, tares and hemp and whatever, where it's black, I think it gives you a massive advantage on some waters. Certainly at Maxi number 1, all them years ago, again, while I still lived at Lincoln, I caught loads on it.
Yeah?
Silly amounts. And on there, I also used to catch that on floater. And so I used to use the cat biscuits, whatever, another. Again, it's a particle, isn't it? People sort of like sit there with just a boilie on. And yet when they go floater fishing, they chuck a load of particles on the top, and they actually see what happens. That can happen on the bottom as well, if you get it right. So you've got to sort of like think about what you can see and what you can't see, what you can imagine and what is actually happening under that surface. It's all very, very interesting. Like for many years, I only fished boilies because we didn't sell particles, and so I've always been loyal to what I do and what I work. So I literally only ever used boilies for ages. But I used to use a lot of sort of like little 10 by 12 mil chops, and again using them as like scatter baits, like you would do a particle.
Yeah,
just because it's around a boilie and it's not a piece of seed or a piece of vegetable. It doesn't mean to say that you can't actually use the same sort of idea with it.
Yeah, nice. Max, for you?
I think adding to what Gary said as well, though, you're fishing lakes that are tricky, like your Fendratons and stuff as well. They don't. You were saying about the bait boat situation or the like very tight drops. All them fish feed natural on the natural food and larders, don't they?
Yeah.
And you don't ever see a concentration of like 50 kilo bloodworm like this, do you? You see it all over a weed bed in an area,
I've seen concentrations as massive concentrations of certain types
but
of
it's
snails.
very much a grazing thing, isn't it? As opposed to like a consolidated concentration.
Yeah.
So, like you say, the spread in the bait is something that's probably not so much done these days. Maybe by accident, if there's a few wayward spots and stuff like it's always concentrated. But in terms of fishing, certainly as I started fishing maybe bigger lakes and fishing some of the gravel pits in Lincoln and stuff, it was very much sort of what could go furthest, but also keep them in an area for a longer period of time. And that's when the sort of particles really came into it for me. So I used to boil them up in the garden or in the kitchen, which I did a few occasions until mum and dad kicked off.
Yeah.
And then it would be a case of going down on the bike, like with a wobbly handlebars, like trying to get all the way there and then go and bait up the margins on the southwesterly or whatever it was, you know. Again, developed into actually properly fishing with them on sort of more sort of day ticket lakes, if you like, as I sort of got into the trade more, where I'd go to day tickets and syndicates. But I always seemed to use it to keep them in the swim for longer. That was always the thing, and get a feeding response where I could get maybe a couple of bites, and then also it would be a time that I'd try and clear spots and stuff. And certainly sort of after when there's sort of weed gets up and stuff like that, that is a really good way of using particles.
That's definitely how I
areas.
started using particles. I remember using them to clear spots on the canal, on the river, or even on a little still water that I used to fish. I used to clear the spots. They used to literally, the bream, tench, everything would have a go, be nice and clear. Then I'd just fish boilie over the top. And after time, obviously those carp were feeding in amongst all those bream and tench anyway, and I should have just carried on. But that's part of your learning curve and part of your progression. Yeah. But they are great for, as you say, priming a spot, making sure it's clear of any weed, because they'll strip it right down, won't they?
Yeah, I've obviously done that. If you do that in large quantities, you can do some really crazy things with spots as well. I remember on Bayswater when I fished my first season, I did have an area that I did really give some bait in the end, and I managed, well, even just that area has been carved out. We actually had one of the opportunities, I think one of the chaps had a drone out, so Gary got a guy in to do some drone footage. And oddly enough, I was baiting up on that day, so it was kind of blatant. I was hoping it wasn't going to come out, this video, too soon, because I could see this area. But when the drone went up, it was started off a small spot because I could go out in the boat and like slowly trickle it on. It ended up being massive, and you could catch from either end of it. And I always fished the edges of it, and then one rod in the middle, which would never go. It was always the edges.
Yeah.
But it was certainly something that really developed. And also, I did start really sort of getting into the salt thing as well, you know, that rock salt, applying that and starting that off. And I think that's another sort of, it's not really a particle, it's not really a bait even, it's just obviously the minerals and everything in it are so attractive to them, and it does keep them in an area, doesn't it, if you use it in the right way. So
it does. I find with the salt, you want to be one of the very few people actually using it. It dilutes. If everybody uses it, it dilutes. And then you're just as well off just a little bit in a PVA bag on your hook link.
Just neat.
Yeah. But like, if you're the only person using it, mate, it's incredible.
I was lucky that year because I was the only one that did it.
People forget about these things.
Yeah.
It was written about years ago. They forget about particle. They forget about, you get little spells where on some lakes they forget about boilies, don't they? And you go on there with boilies and you catch them like easy again. It's people don't sort of like fish. They fish to fads rather than fish to what the fish are doing.
And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, they're all getting caught on this. Well, yeah, they would be because everyone's using it.
Yeah, exactly.
But then if the guy comes on, like you hear it all the time, where like very hard lakes and the chaps are baiting, or the guys that live regular, like local, they'll go and fish. I think there's one chap on the Carp Lake. He spent the whole year fishing it, but he barely actually fished. He'd just put a handful of pellet in 1 or 2 swims, and he'd visit them and go, oh, there's one of the ones I want to catch, and he'd drop in and he'd catch one. And he had an amazing couple of seasons doing that, on a very, very hard lake. And I think, sometimes that sort of way of looking at it being a bit different was the reason why he probably capitalised on it, So
talk to me about a lot of the time, and what's been publicised is around if you're boilie only fishing, let's say you've got a throwing stick and you're spreading boilies around the place, you've got fish moving, and that movement helps you in terms of the hooking process and catching them. If you're fishing a lot of sort of modern day waters, let's take linear as a sort of a classic day ticket example, high stock, a lot of people are trying to fish as tight as possible with 3 rods on a spot. You've got a concentrated amount of bait, a lot of particle, and we've talked about keeping fish in the swim. When they're feeding on particle, in your experience, and you've got them on a small spot with the particle there, are they as easy to hook? Do you have to make any rig adjustments, any hook bait adjustments to make sure that happens? Because if they're pinned to the deck on a small spot, not really moving between mouthfuls, in theory, if you think about it, something's got to change rather than a sort of a 12-inch hook length and a balanced bait on the end of it in order to capitalise on a run.
Cool. I think they all get away with it, don't they? No matter what you do. But also, I think a day ticket like linear, there's obviously been underwater videos and all sorts of it. How fast are them fish moving? Like there's not so much of that slow feeding, very tight on the bottom at linear. There's coming in like an absolute rocket, hoover and go, and then they swim round, chew it up and go back and do it again. Yeah. And there's that exchange of carp on the spot so constant that I think actually you get away with a lot more. Yeah. But then like I've seen it in the edge when you're fishing real close in and you put a smattering of hemp around, maybe a few maggots, and they take forever. They've taken single maggots almost, and you're sat there going, how do I replicate this as hookbait, you know? So you got to change it up and tweak it. But yeah, I think it's very much, it's down to stock and competition. Yeah. As much as you can, as much as drawing out of that as you can to sort of figure out how many bites I can get and what sort of changes in my rig I'm going to do. Because that's the critical thing, isn't it? Is understanding what to do when it's maybe not quite working out, and then make that change to work it. So Gary may have obviously a different point of view.
Gary just looked at me going, "You're talking absolute nonsense, lad."
No, everything's different. Different waters, different. But like years ago, and I mean donkeys years ago, we used to get bite-offs with particle. Yeah. Literally, you'd reel in, you've got no hook on.
Yeah, my dad said he used to fish like a 2-inch hair.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about before we knew about hers.
Oh, really? Right.
He's side hooking 2 maples or black-eyed bees and something like that. And like, you'd reel in, your hook's gone. Literally, your hook's gone. Yeah, and so like we ended up with sort of like 2-inch hook links. And we used to do everything we could to get it all tighter, like barrel leads and stuff like that. You know, we didn't have the lead situation, what you can buy a lead for every job nowadays. And, we're barrel leads, sea fishing leads, all sorts of things. And like, once you got it right, suddenly you go one weekend and maybe catch one or not catch any. You try something different, and the next week, and you get like 10 or 12 fish. Yeah. And it's like, and you just realise you've been doing it so bloody wrong the time before. So you just got to be really careful. And then, like, it's the same with anything, innit? Like, years ago when I fished the Manor the first time around, I did really, really well. And then one year I struggled. And everybody was using hinge stiff rigs. And so I thought, I'm not going to copy everybody else. I'll just use the 3-inch bit on the end. And that's all I did. With a sort of like 5-ounce lead tied to it. I caught loads. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like...
I bet that scared them when they got them.
It's like, you've just got to change things a little bit. And it's the same bait and everything. I was catching nothing. Gone to a 3-inch hook link, I caught loads.
Yeah, so make your adjustments.
And I've had the same on with particle fishing, with all sorts of fishing. Even with float fishing for roach and things like that, you just change your shot and you start catching them again. You just got to really keep changing things and thinking a little bit more about it than the latest rig, what you've seen in the mags or on Facebook.
I think that's the key element, isn't it? Is being able to make those changes, but also have the knowledge, if you like, to make, I know it's trial and error to some extent, but to make a sort of an accurate change on that. It's not always easy for people if they haven't fishing for a long period of time. They've put some particles out, they might have the same rigs, they might not have the sort of knowledge base to be able to refine things. But in concept, if you're fishing particle and you're fishing and you're not getting, let's say, results, or for instance, they definitely feed on them, you might not be in the right spot. But if they are feeding on them and you're having problems, if you like, hooking them, what would be your sort of rules with regards to how you'd approach spot fishing with particle? Hook baits as well, because I mean...
Hook link length would be the first thing. Like I say, you go right down to 3 inches. One nice little rig what seems to give you a little bit more confidence, if you like, for hooking and what have you, is literally a naked chod, but with the bottom bait on, single tiger, something like that. A lot of people catch a lot of fish doing that, and I don't think they advertise it a lot. And I've caught 1 or 2 fish doing it. I don't like it, but like I've caught 1 or 2 fish doing it. So there's a nice little edge, and it actually does work, but you need a clean bottom for that. Yeah. There's quite a few different things you can do, but like fishing just off the area. My casting, I'm probably missed the area anyway. So
that's why you like a spread, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I get this when I'm feeder fishing for chub, say on stillwater chub. I've found like have the hook link, a very short hook link, way up your line, and have a really long link with your feeder on. Right. And it's like they'll be eating what's in that feeder, see that bunch of 3 maggots, come and get it, go back to the feeder, and you get really unmissable bites. You put everything near that feeder and you get little taps, you don't even know what's a bite, and you just...
That's a cool idea.
Yeah. And you could just sort of like do it like that. I use a lot of different pattern. I've used quite a lot of paternoster rigs for carp fishing and everything because you know if you've got, say, roach chewing on the end of a 12 or 20 mil boilie, if you've got a link, you'll see that, you'll get that blip, 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 blip as it's moving that about. Whereas if you've got it tight to a lead and it's not moving the lead, you don't see nothing.
Yeah.
I've seen the same when I'm river fishing with link ledges, running leads. With a running lead, you can recast quicker and everything. And how many people you see cast out and lose the lead with lead clips? Just use a running lead. If you're not fishing near snags, you can cast quicker, you can learn quicker, get it in the wrong place, reel it in, cast it in the right place, and you just see more things. And if you've got animals like them poisson chat, say, in the French rivers, you just don't know when your bait's gone. Whereas with a little link ledge here, you just get the single little taps and single little movements and it stops, your bait's gone. Reel in, new bait, chuck it out, you're fishing again. Whereas if you just sat there with a fixed lead, you ain't got a clue.
No,
you ain't got a clue.
Off,
So just reading everything, what happens in your swim. When you're bream fishing Fendrain, I used to fish for the bream to catch the carp. So I used to use a lot of particle to get the bream really feeding their heads off, which obviously brought the carp in eventually, but the carp was so few, the bream were dominant when you got a lot of bream in your swim. But you catch, say, 6 or 7 double figure bream, and then it go quiet, quickly put the small hookbaits on, because the big hookbaits were the best for the bream. Because
small hookbaits, you think small hookbaits would be bream to death?
No, how many people have you had say, I don't know how big a bait I could put on, they've got another bream?
Yeah, it's true.
Once you get them feeding greedy, they are greedy. Yeah, so you use double 20 mil boilies to get more fish.
What are we talking when small hookbait? What did you switch to?
The carp in Fendrain, we never used to catch them on big hookbaits. Yeah. So I had to drop them down to sort of like double 12 or something like that. Okay. Critically balanced always, because all the natural food is critically balanced. All the food you chuck in is critically balanced. Yeah. Most of it is, everything's a lot lighter in water than what it is on the bank anyway. A 3 ounce lead only weighs, I can't remember now, is it an ounce underwater? I can't remember now. I think it's about a third of the weight. And so, just do that. And so you be catching these bream, what you've got feeding their head off on particle, like Max says, clear the areas and whatever. I didn't do it to clear areas because I was always fishing on reasonable areas, because bream don't really like feeding in weed. And then when the bream have run out of food, all your line bites stop, you quickly reel in, put a small, I call a carp bait, a small bait on, chuck it back out again, and you catch a 30-pound carp.
That's mad, isn't it? And
it's like, what a morning's fishing. A load of big bream and a 30-pound carp. It's much better than moaning about the bream and not catching the 30-pound carp, isn't it?
I'd let you have the bream, Gal. Just wait for the carp.
But you don't catch them.
Yeah, you don't on those small hookbaits. Yeah, nice. I like that. Yeah. Hookbaits in general, over the top of that, there is a concept or a theory, people have said it before, they get preoccupied on those small, especially hemp seed, for example. If you bait mass with hemp, people think it's difficult to get a bite over the top of it. You might see them fizzing over it. You might see all that, but they get preoccupied by those really tiny little black items. Hookbaits over the top generally, do you go for something bright and garish? Do you go for something ultra small? Do you go for something completely contrasting? Do you go for a pop-up? Do you go for a bottom bait? Talk me through your thinking around that.
We've got a few rods, normally 3. So try one on everything. One that's a bit dull, one that sort of blends in. Obviously, in the case of hemp, it's quite hard to imitate hemp, but I have done it before on lakes where I've actually just trimmed down a piece of foam and that slow sinks and put that over a deep concentration of hemp.
We used
carp before.
We used multi-hair rigs years ago.
Multi-hair rigs.
3 or 4 hair rigs with 3 or 4 grades of hemp on each one.
Yeah.
Didn't really catch much. But I know people that do fairly well.
Yeah.
I've caught quite a lot of carp on the right water, like Canary Islands, a place like that, on 100 grains of sweet corn as a hook bait.
100 grains of sweet corn?
Yeah, just massive. And you don't catch a little carp come in your swim. You get a load of carp coming in your swim, rolling and whatever. One big one jumps or rolls. About 10 minutes later, you've got him.
The old 100 grain hair. What a rig.
Yeah.
Imagine taking that to your local option.
And I know people who's done the same, and used the same sort of thing in England and caught quite well.
Yeah.
On the right water. Yeah, they're either petrified of it or they can't wait to eat it.
Petrified or can't wait to eat it. 50-50.
Playing on the greed factor of it, aren't you?
Yeah. You talked about foam, so foam hook baits to match a grain of hemp.
I've done it with hemp and pellet. Obviously, it's quite hard to imitate, if you like, but I've basically got a hook and in essence glued a piece of foam on the back of it and just trimmed it down so it sunk really slowly. Because I think it gets to a point where the water's so clouded up and the food's so concentrated that they're just hoovering anything. and then you've got a chance of hooking them, you know. And yeah,
that's a really good ploy in really shallow water as well.
Yeah,
where you're getting the swans and everything, eating everything.
Yeah,
because like it's only the fish what eat foam. The swans never seem to eat a piece of foam.
True.
That's what you did at Mary's, wasn't it? I remember you saying to me that's how you got overfishing shallow water over bait.
Yeah, and I've done it at Bayswater on the day to get lake in the shallows. You know, 6 fish in an evening on a piece of foam on a chod.
That's crazy, isn't it?
With everybody else don't fish up there because the swans annihilate them.
Yeah, and invariably, if they're up there and people aren't fishing there, then there's a good head of fish up there.
Then it's
game on. Yeah. What about bright hook baits, for example? Little fluoros over the top of something dark and dull. Effective, not effective?
Certainly on a bite's water, like anywhere that there's a concentration of fish coming in and you want to get a bite quick over a decent amount of bait when you've got obviously one spot that's got a hell of a lot of bits in it, you know. So you want to try and get that bite quick. I would try any colour. I like a yellow, obviously. Sweet corn's yellow. I do seem to have a sort of favourite of yellow, and maybe it's not so much in favour as it used to be, more pinks and whites and stuff. But yeah, I think there is fish do get colour specific, or lakes sometimes do as well. And again, it goes back to everyone's using it, so that's going to be the reason that you get the bite. But if you do notice a sort of pattern where a pink bait is doing better than others, then it seems silly not to try and at least have that on one rod to sort of understand it. I noticed as well on lakes that have got sort of younger carp, reared carp that have been stocked recently that have got a lot of fish in. Obviously, a lot of places say fish with pellet because they've been reared on it. But I found that if I fish with a pink pop-up over pellet, they seem to have this thing for pink when you're fishing like new fish, almost like it's so blatantly obvious. It's the only thing they just go for and they have it quick, you know.
So, I think you'd find the same with white as well.
Yeah.
White's an excellent hook bait.
Yeah. You, Garrel, bright hook baits, are they your thing?
I've got them in my bag.
Do you use them much? You are not going to be using
not loads. My favourite pop up always used to be the scope squid one. What we used to do, which was like a sandy yellow. Right. We used to mix brown and yellow dye together, and make a sandy yellow. It's what I used all the time at Fen. It worked really good when I was fishing over top of particle for the bream and everything, and catching the carp after the bream. It worked really good when I was fishing over maggots at Fen. It works good everywhere I've gone, to be honest. And when I make my corkboard pop-ups, you know, I always make some of that colour and do quite well on it. I caught Bayswater this year on it. It's just like my favourite colour. It's just my favourite colour. But I've got two-tone and a bright white one. Yeah. When everybody else was using yellow. At one point white was the new yellow, but then it's all gone back to pink, and it's like purple. I like purple as well. I've got a lot on purple. It's whatever you're using at the time. Colour makes a difference with fishing, but 100%. Like I've fished for all different species, and you mix white and red maggots together, and you fish for roach, and you get all your bites one day on the white, another day it's all on the red. It makes a massive difference, but it's carp fishing, slow motion fishing, and it's not always easy to get it right at the right time. When I fished the A1 pitch years and years ago, I used to make all my own bait, and I used to make all different colours, and I used to mix them together, and like hook bait wise, it'd be one rod's on every different colour what I've got with me, and it suddenly you just get a couple of bites on the red one, and then that's it. I just change it all to red, and you do well. But you don't always get that indication of what is best on the day that quick. And so I think you just got to leave your options open. And I certainly wouldn't want to sit there with the same bait, same colour pop-up on forever. Yeah. We did mixed tubs of pop-ups, and I think that's the best way to get your pop-ups in mixed tubs. But the trouble is you get colour bleed and things like that. It's hard to present it to the customer like that, and they go, oh, look, that's gone a bit monkey. Well, yeah, but it doesn't matter, mate. It's going to catch a fish.
But perfect. Yeah, exactly. Over the top of particle, we talked there about hook baits, we talked there about colours and stuff. Rig-wise, a pop-up, or would you want to fish on the deck as much as possible if it's relatively clean and you can do so?
Two of each.
Yeah.
Again.
Two of each, yeah. I think, to be honest with you, I like sort of wafter baits or little pop-ups, something that's quite close to the bottom where they're sifting through and stuff like that. But I've caught quite a few uncultured hook baits over it, because once that skin sort of broke down around it, it sort of masked a bit more stuff. And the aminos and everything in a cultured up bait are incredible. So oddly enough, I think I try lots of pop-ups. I do make my own and do muck around and stuff, but I think Dan Yeomans does the same, and you just end up sort of gravitating back to a cultured up bait, and you back one of them out and catch one. So
yeah,
there is something in it, you know. But anything sort of small, if I have to replicate the feed, little bit of fake sweet corn sometimes is just all you need, you know. So if you allow plastic baits on the lake, you know. Yeah, just sort of varying it. Depends on what you're feeding, really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so.
Of course, fair. Yeah, fair. Same for you, Gal? One of each and see what's happening?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of quickly balanced.
Yeah.
And as critical as you can get it. You know,
ultra slow.
Yeah, like even allowing for it coming straight off the lead to start with, because it's going to take in some water, your bottom bait is, and get a little bit heavier to pull your little bit of pop up what you got on top down. Yeah,
slow as you like.
Yeah, I don't like if you know you're going to get the bite in the morning. Set it up for the morning. Don't set it up for the night.
Yeah,
it popped up for 3 hours and then
12 hours.
I've caught plenty off straight off the lead anyway.
Yeah,
so.
Off the lead. Yeah, exactly.
That's not done so often these days either, is it?
Yeah,
fair. I wanted to talk about times of year, pre and post spawning and all that, and how your choice of particle is sort of dictated to you. So if I said to you, typically, what are we in now? We're filming this in the very start of March. We're going into the spring. Obviously, the fish haven't spawned. We're coming through winter. What type of particle, what decisions would you be going through in order to select a particle to approach whatever venue it is that you're fishing? Is there anything to do with the water temperature? Is there anything to do with that? Or is it just, I've caught well on this at this time of year, so I'm going to go for that?
I reckon at the beginning of the year, I'd probably use a small seed mix with the target nut over the top as a hook bait. You know, that would be my initial approach, and maybe just sort of like half dozen target nuts as free offerings in among that seed mix. Probably boost it with some liquid. I'm not a fan of like oils popping off or whatever. You know, I like bait soaks, which are sort of like only 1/3 oil or even less than 1/3 oil. It just gets everything going and it keeps it near the hook bait. I don't want it up on the surface, drifted into the reeds. I want it where I'm fishing. So that's how I'd probably start if I was just only on particles. You know, like I'd also have a single hook bait out somewhere, wherever I thought there's some fish or were, you know, and just fish about a little bit. But this is the time, you know, I've seen fish in really shallow water yesterday when we was netting. We just putting a boat, liming rather, just putting a boat in, and we see some fish in an area which I then went and grounded the boat on. And it's like, you know, and there was in quite shallow water, and I like a little tiny handful of hemp or a little tiny handful of seed mix with a target nut as an hook bait. I bet you'd have got a bite.
Yeah,
I bet you would have got a bite.
Do you think them more readily accepted in sort of particle form if you're fishing particles with them, rather than, especially at this time of year, rather than chucking a big old, I don't know, cultured hook bait over the top of them or something like that? Do you think it's more readily sort of, I don't know, I think a grain of sweet corn's always going to go in it.
Yeah. It's like, you know, this is like when we went over there with the boat, we spooked two fish at one point. I don't know how many fish was there. It's in a load of floating weed and everything.
Yeah.
But like, you know, there's definitely 100% carp there. Don't know what sort of numbers. When you might only be fishing for one or two, because they all don't all get active when it's early. Yeah, there might be just an handful of active ones, and the rest are still holed up somewhere for the winter if they haven't been fished for, especially. So, you know, you're fishing for smaller numbers, so you're not going to pile it in and hoping that the whole of half the fish in the lake's going to get on your bait, because they're not. So just like little sort of like subtle, bit more subtle and bit
Traps.
more.
For you, Max, what would you choose? You're going out tomorrow. If you're going to use some particle, what would you deploy?
I do like my hemp, but also I think anything that's sort of a bit fine, like Carrie's saying, if you're trying to get a trap set, you want to like give them a smatter in a bait just to get them interested, get them actually out of maybe a bit of slow movingness, if you know what I mean. But then again, we're into spring, aren't we? They're up and they're moving about. They're trying to find bits of rubbing spots, get rid of some leeches, and they're a bit more active. So I think depending on the stock, I'm just going to look to put a bit out and just see whether start getting liners or any interest, or if I'm seeing fish visually, then it is like a small amount of pinch or whatever in an area, and rig over the top. Yeah, but even if it's a PVA bag, you know, you can, if you're put salt with some of your particles. You make a PVA bag and put just a little PVA bag of it out or whatever. Something that's just a bit of interest that's going to get them having a look and maybe get them tipped down and have a go. So,
any liquid on it or any other attractants?
To be honest with you, I quite like the sort of the basic ones, like Gary says, like a bait soak, as he says, like it's got sort of heavy liquids and your oil, so it's got the best of both worlds. Whereas obviously you can put oil in, but like he says, it's halfway down the lake. You only have to see an oil slick, don't you? And it's spread out across an acre or whatever. Whereas, that heavy liquid in the bait soaks is really good for getting on the bottom. And as a result, it sort of sits there and clings. And that's what you want, is that like clinging in the bottom. So when they do turn up or you've got small fish, they're going to disturb it and it gets it even more activated really. And gets them interested. So
it's a little bit stronger than the spod suet. The spod suet's similar sort of thing. But like the spod spirit's a volume liquid, whereas the bait soak you can use a smaller amount.
Yeah.
And it's like, you still got the same amount of kick in it, if you like. It's different between a whiskey and a pint of beer.
Yeah, fair. You can see it as well when you've got it and you've left it somewhere. You can see it separate. And when you've
got to shake it every use, every single use.
Definitely.
Yeah.
As you go through the year, so obviously we're early spring, sort of coming out of winter now, if you like. As the water warms up before the fish spawn, what sort of particles would you look at then?
So if it's before the fish spawn, I would always apply the salt to that mix. But like Gary says, you can quite quickly dilute your success if you like, if you're putting it everywhere. So I'd find somewhere that I know has got a bit of spring form, maybe from previous captures and areas. But I wouldn't just go to like the default area that everyone fishes at 20 wraps or whatever. I would find an area of my own that maybe needs a bit of work in terms of like clearing it off or just getting it to the point where the fish are sort of getting used to it, away from the crowds, if you like. Yeah. And I'd start applying like salt, probably like a coarse salt, like the Himalayan rock salt, in with some seeds that are going to be digestible while the water's sort of still coming up in terms of temperature. So the small seed would be pretty good for that because of the starches are sort of already sort of coming out of it, and it's easy for the fish to get through them. Hemp, because I just have a massive faith in it, and I sometimes think that confidence is actually one of the biggest things that sort of can ruin your fishing. So I always stay confident a bit of that, and then a bit of chopped tiger nut, because I know how much carp love tiger nuts as well. Yeah, and that sort of mix will be just enough, and then I've got the option for fishing a tiger or a piece of maize or bits around it, that I can then add to, and not forgetting a bit of boilie. Obviously, is always a complementary part of a mix, So I think I'd develop a spot if I was fishing on a syndicate of any kind in that way. But if I was sort of dialing it back to fish at a day ticket lake or something like that, them sort of constituent parts would be the same. The only difference would be either the regularity of feeding or the way in which I do it, and obviously based on the stock, the quantity in which I feed in order to get a reaction. So, and then, like you say, draw it, figure out, understand what they want to do rigs wise, and develop it from there.
Gary, for you?
I just keep just very small seeds before spawning, really, because then if the carp aren't on it for whatever reason, other species will clear it up. I don't like to think there's sort of like bait sat on the bottom. At Bayswater this last year, there was a lot of tiger nuts went in, and they're banned from some places. And I can understand why. There was just loads of dead tiger nuts popping up to the top, and like when you pop them, they're just completely rotten. They're never going to get eaten by anything, and it's just like, it's not good, and it's just a misuse of bait. It's not. It's the same with any bait, particles or whatever, ground baits, whatever you like. But it is, the misuse of bait is sometimes a little bit awkward, especially if you actually run the water. Because like when you run the water, it's not like the anchorage angler. You can't mess it up and then just walk off. I own the water. I run the water.
It's yours, yeah.
It's mine. I'm stuck. And that's why some waters put in rules. Sometimes they put in the wrong rules, but like they put in rules to try and protect their own fishing, and of course, the fishing for the other customers as well, the other people what's fishing the lakes. So it's a little bit awkward. Like I'm renowned for using a lot of bait. I've always had it available. It's my weapon, and I use it. But like I try not to use it bad. Yeah. And like you sometimes can make a mistake. And with the smaller seeds, if you make a mistake, it's more than likely going to go. Yeah. Even tufties and stuff like that love getting on the hemp and stuff. Whereas like they don't seem to so much with the bigger seeds, like the maize and whatever. They have a bit of maize, but they don't really go for it hard. swans do in shallow water, but like swans can't dive in sort of like 12-foot water, can they?
No, true.
So I just feel it's better to keep to the smaller seeds early on when the fish are a bit moody and they might turn into spawning. As soon as they spawn, they're not going to eat that big bed of bait what you chucked in the day before. It's like, I just think you got to think of the lake a little bit as well. And your future fishing.
Salt, Gary?
Only if I'm the only one using it. Yeah. And then if I'm not the only one using it, I only use it actually as part of my Hookbaits system, like your PVA bag or whatever.
And quantities, let's say you got, I don't know, what's the standard jar that we do of party mix? Is it a litre, a bit more?
2.5 litres.
2.5 litres. Get 2.5 litres. How much salt would you put in a mix of 2.5 litre particles?
If I was the only person...
Yeah, you're the only one, sorry.
If I was the only person fishing Bayswater for the next few months, there'd be half a sack of it in the same spot.
That's
every other day. But as soon as...
Straight through the paint barrier.
As soon as everybody else is doing it, and they're doing it over there, and they're doing it over there, it's lost its edge.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and then it's just hookbaits, concentrating hookbaits. So then you've got to go back to finding the fish a little bit better or attracting the fish with other feed and then zooming it into that hookbait with using salt, the attraction of the salt, a bit like you would have boilie dip or whatever.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. Good. As we've moved into summer, so post-spawn, they've spawned the carp. You're in summer months. What are you going for now? Obviously, quantity-wise might change, but in terms of the actual particles, bigger particles?
Yeah, I'd say so. But as Gary says, sometimes you've got to sort of read the room when it comes to the lake. If the bailiff's walking around going, or you're seeing these evidence of bait just popping up and stuff, then they're not eating it. So then you could probably actually figure out that maybe they don't want tiger nuts that week and maybe I'll try something else.
That was late summer. It all went wrong late summer.
Was it?
And there was all fishing wrong late summer from what I saw. A few anglers were doing all right. Like, just after spawning, they're ravenous. And like, I think they was eating everything that was chucked at them. Yeah. And I think the bigger the bait, the better. Yeah. So the bigger particles will be better. I know every year at Bayswater, the minute they spawn, double 20 mils are going to get more bites than double 12 mils.
Yeah. They need to put on condition.
Yeah, they just
want a parcel, don't they, as big as they can get in. Yeah. They know he's got energy in it. So.
Feed me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can't say for other waters. I know other waters are under different types of pressure and what have you, but like, I've pretty much always, whenever I fish anywhere except for Fendrayton, which didn't like big baits, bigger baits after spawning. Cunning book, single 20 mil boilie was more likely to get a bite than anything. It was like, it was the way forward. And like, I didn't invent that. My mate, who don't catch much, actually caught a couple. I thought, fucking hell.
I'm not slow at coming
maybe
forward.
Maybe you'll get one for you, Tom.
And then finally into winter. So you've gone into winter. You're obviously your cold water there. Were you looking at anything particular? Small again, soluble, like sweet corn base, small seed? Back to that?
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah. Sweet corn. We obviously got a creamed corn, which is like smashed up sweet corn with and then big kernels as well, all sort of blended together. But it's not just sweet corn, is it? It's that sweet corn flavour that Gary developed. It's got sweeteners, got a bit of salt in it. So it's nicely rounded. So you're getting all that solubility of flavour. Like, for instance, the sweeteners that we make as well, they're highly soluble, aren't they, for the winter time? Yeah. They get into the water column quick, and obviously that's what you want to try and use when you're trying to pull fish in. Gary's always said to me that with maggot fishing, even if you're fishing PVA bags of maggots, scope X and sweetener, like in a ratio, depending on the water temperature, was always really good. I kind of wanted to play on that a bit with that corn because I knew that it would have it'd have interest, even in the coldest water.
Yeah, it makes a difference. The metabolism slows right down, so they don't see so good, they don't smell so good, they don't taste so good, don't digest so good, they don't need so much food because everything's slowed down. You imagine if you just gone into a coma, you're not doing nothing, and that's almost what metabolism is. It's like states of activity. And so as the water temperature drops, because they're cold-blooded, the metabolism slows, and so your little, like, tiny little points of attraction just mean that little bit more. It's everybody used to sort of like get on the glugs in the winter, didn't they? Then everybody does it all year round now, so it's like diluted. So you've got to start looking at the solubility of what you're using and just what you're using. Yeah, it's like we mentioned the spod civets earlier, they're brilliant in the winter because they just cling about and they just go in sort of like slow motion into the water. Use them actually and get them to the bottom as quick as you can, and they'll do a lot of work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely so. I like that. We're going to talk particle range. I know that Max, both of you are integral in sort of the mixes, but I know that Max, you've taken a lot of the operation side of stuff. Talk to me about the actual ins and outs of all that, mate, because it's
How long you got?
It's a fair old job, isn't it?
So yeah, it was. Well, it started off is quite a weird one, really. We had heard, I can't remember who it was. Someone approached me and basically said, oh, "I've got one of these machines. They're called a retort machine. So it's like a pressure cooker, essentially." Yeah. And it was in a farmyard in Norfolk. That could only be the best description of it.
Yeah.
So me and Gary went for a day trip, didn't we? And we got a nice breakfast, and we went down to this farmyard, which was a bit more posh than we thought it was. Like, I thought it was going to be the proper, like, middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
like, and it would just be this horrid looking machine that was all a bit broken up and rubbish. But we got there, and it was actually quite in good nick, wasn't it? And
I've looked at a few before, and they've always been like how we expected this one to be. Yeah. And this one, when we see it, it looked like it had only just been used.
Yeah. Like not much mileage in it.
Yeah.
And it came with a few added extras, like different vessels and stuff for the like heating process. And we went away quite interested, didn't we? So yeah, phone call to Kev and said we found one. There was actually nowhere to put it. We didn't even have a place to put it, did we? We just went, we want to do particles, and this is the first step, because like they're quite hard to come by. I mean,
what were they asking? What money were they asking for that?
So
give me an idea.
Like OK one was about 70k, wasn't it?
Yeah.
A brand new one's 200 grand plus.
Wow.
And we got this one for 35 grand, didn't we?
Yeah.
What?
Which later transpired there was an American company willing to pay for it only at like the day after we okayed it and get it shipped to America for 70 grand. So we were like, we've had a steal. Like this is an absolute result. Again, like I say, nowhere to put it. So we had this like predicament, didn't we? And we had it on hold. We had it on like this other site, just sat there like with this at this farmyard in essence, but sheeted up for ages. And then finally, I got this okay to get hold of it, like a premises. Oddly enough, it was a chap that does a lot of our fabricating and stuff. And it used to be for cars. It was an auto practice, and it had car ramps, it had old minis, it had a paint shop, like paint spraying room and everything in it. And obviously it was like looking around this, we were sat there thinking, right, how are we going to visualise how this is going to go? And we went away once we got a floor plan and started putting like the places in the spots exactly where it needs to go, you know?
When was the actual thought behind the decision? Was it always a decision that you're going to do particle as part of NashBait?
We've been there before, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I've looked at several retorts, and they've always been just about on the last legs. And like it's always been a pipe dream to do it, and then we don't do it, and so on. And at one point, we had somebody cook particle for us. We did it in bags.
Yes.
Really good.
Yeah.
A lot easier than doing it in tubs, except you can't get a carrier to get the bag there in one piece.
A lot of splittage.
Yeah, terrible. And it goes a long way. A bit, 2.5 litres of sloppy whatever goes a long way. And so we've already sold particle before, and like these mixes were mixes what I put together before Max was even there, and like we've refined them mixes a little bit since. Max has done loads of work on the different starch contents and stuff like that, and the way they cook and the way the different cooking them how we do now is different to do it in the bags. It's not an exact science. Nobody else has done it as such. But I know people do cook in retorts and everything.
Yeah.
But nobody else has sort of like really put the effort in to make it a little bit more special, a little bit different, a little bit more how I'd do it at home. I've got some right good cooking stuff. I can cook loads of particle up in one go at home. I've got probably about 8 gas bottles. So they can run like serious amount of burners.
Your missus,
no, just
she's there stirring.
She's there. And like I can just do it at home. And like I love cooking my particle. I love making me hookbaits. I used to make all my own bottom baits. You do 50 kilos in a night because I don't bother rolling them around because you can buy them in the shop. And like, so to get this retort and to start doing it how we're doing now, we've had a lot of previous experience. Them bags, they sold as fast as we could get them in. We sold them all. We used them ourselves.
It was crying out for it, wasn't it, Gary? That's the thing. It was absolutely, and it almost established this like notoriety obviously the guys here always talked about the tiger nut slush. They were
Yeah,
like, this is the
yeah.
best. The seed mixes.
What
were
video?
like
I can't remember what
perfect blends.
videos it was used in.
Yeah,
it was used in
like
some videos.
Eurobanks. and
Everyone
all
was
sorts.
searching for it. Like,
Yeah.
where is it? Where is it?
And
So it's a
obviously-
little bit like the boilers. Like you buy a boiler machine, and you've got to tailor your mix to the boiler machine.
Yeah.
No, we use our mix and we tailor the machine
Yeah.
to our mixes.
Yeah, and that's what had to happen. With
And
the
that's
seeds.
that's what we're doing with the seeds.
Yeah.
I want to do individual seeds in the future. The trouble is everybody will moan there's too big a range, but I like using individual seeds and mixing them up depending. Like I love hemp, maples, turs. I love all the dark ones. Sometimes you catch more fish on the dark ones. Stick so much yellow out there, a bit of maize and what have you, and it's like spoils it.
Yeah.
So I want them options eventually. So at the minute,
So you can make your own custom mix, can you?
cook them at home. Obviously, cook them at home.
Yeah.
But like,
So talk to me about from that point where you've got this bit of machinery, so you sorted, it's there, it's tarped up, you've got a premises and a plan to eventually get it over. From that point, where's it gone?
Right, so we've got. I'm at a show at Brentwood Carp Show.
Yeah.
And I've got one of our compressor engineers, Alex, very good carp angler, has turned up, and I've said, so I've got this machine, don't know anything on what to do. Right, I've got no experience of thermal processes or anything like that. But do you know anyone that deals with autoclaves or retorts? And the chap behind him went, yeah, my dad does. And I went, bloody hell, he couldn't write it. I said, right, here's my card. Get him to give me a ring. So I've met this chap called Chris Reed. Chris Reed is an autoclave expert who does work for all these different sort of universities, but it's mostly in medical retorts. So
What's a medical-
an autoclave is for the medical industry is like a sterilisation unit. So
Okay.
they apply a lot of heat and they don't necessarily apply pressure at all, do they?
for a certain length of time and everything. And
So it's to kill the bacteria. So
Yeah.
it means that it can use a
it's no
set
good
of
killing
pliers again or whatever.
99.9%.
No, you've got to
probably need it
nuke
all gone, don't
yeah,
you?
yeah. So
Nuke it.
yeah, so they have to nuke it, and as a result, like he obviously deals with them sort of systems, so there's a bit of experience there, you know. He then brought on another chap that was hugely experienced in the food side of it, which obviously has a different application.
Yeah.
And we had a meeting, and it developed from there. Seb also came to work with me, and he was like project manager. So we outlined exactly the floor plan we wanted, where we wanted stuff to go. We had to get people in to design high pressure steam boiler systems. So we needed one that could service the retort in its volume, but also not lose the whole of its contents, if you know what I mean, of steam pressure, which could flatten it and obviously cause quite a big explosion.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But then also all the pipe work has to be like uprated. You're dealing with into the boiler, you're dealing with up to 12 bar pressure. And when you get to 12 bar, you're looking at 274 degrees of saturated steam. Like it's
You ain't gonna lift the
blooming
lid on
hot,
that,
you know,
are you?
like, yeah, that's it. And you're dealing with these systems that could go bang if you're not doing the requisite like safety measures and everything like that. So it was a massive learning curve. And yeah, I know quite a bit more now, but it was a lot of reading.
I'm not going to lie, Max, that sounds dull.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a lot of red tape around that, isn't there?
Yeah, in the end, I think I actually got one of the consultants. He actually sent me a book on thermodynamics, and he was like, "Right, you got to read this, like, because you'll get it." But thermodynamics applied, so food, like how it thermal transfer and stuff like that. Gary was actually not meaning to demean him, but he was actually really he understood stuff so quickly, and that was really helpful as well because I could sort of lean on his ideas and stuff like that. And also he has built factories now. You've built two, haven't you? So
you're not going to be happy with all the paperwork and planning around it all, though, are you? You just want to knock it up in a night, don't you?
And that's why I credit to Seb. Yeah. So he basically went, "You've dug yourself an hole. You deal with it." And like when it comes to the product, like Gary's invaluable. You know? He knows what a good particle. He knows everything like that. And I can put my 2 pence in, but like this is going to be Max and Seb, like green as you like, just learn and do it. So we did. And yeah, credit to Seb, like he kept it all going really well because I've still got to run a bait factory and I've still got to do what I do as a side job. It was very much like checking in with Seb. We'd have lots and lots of meetings all the time. We'd get the right consultants in, make sure the works were going the way they needed to. Obviously, COVID hit. That presented a problem. we had to spend several weeks where we couldn't do anything, and then we had a very small amount of us there. It was literally like me and him some days doing certain works to get ready for the next people to turn up. And then they developed like all the pipe work systems. So you've obviously been there now, haven't you? And yeah, we had a boiler house specifically designed. We obviously had the retort next to it, and then we've made a packaging line as well that can fill the jars, seal them, etc. We had to develop everything from scratch.
Fair play.
Gary would come in and tell us like, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that."
They didn't even have a sink at one time.
Didn't have a sink at one point. But you know, when you're like looking through something and you're just going like, "These are all the technicalities," and then we all.
You get lost.
We're
going to wash our hands.
Yeah, we're going to wash my hands today. Like, or I've got to go outside now.
I need a wee.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I can't actually go for a pony because I haven't got to sort the toilet out or whatever, you know. So it was quite a interesting one. But that was kind of helpful. Like I say, Gary's got a head on his shoulders to go, and he's got a habit of picking out the
bits you miss.
the most annoying things that do annoy me in hindsight. But yeah, at the time I'm completely past that, and I'm thinking about this steam line or this blowdown vessel or whatever. So they repurposed some of it. We got a boiler. The boiler was that came with the retort was considered quite. It was an antique one. It should be in a museum.
It was considered safe and it pressure tested and everything, but it wasn't going to do the job.
No.
We needed more. We just needed a better. And there's no point in learning how to use one and then buying one that's going to be completely different and start learning again. So we took the jump and bought a brand new one.
And that will service 2 retorts. So if you want to upscale in the future, we can.
That's again thinking of the future, because I built a factory and it was 5 minutes later it wasn't big enough. Built another factory and it's now not big enough. We need another factory, but like I don't want to build that. But Max do that. And you've got to think of the future, because you don't want to stay still. You want to get better, bigger, and it's not being greedy. There's like more we want to do.
Yeah. But also
we want to push the envelope. Always, and that's kind of always been the overriding factor, is how do we push the envelope? And for us, that was to bring like the highest quality particles we could. We could have gone very basic. We could have sourced very poor ingredients, but like me and Gary and Pete, who's in the sort of purchasing side of things, we were sourcing hemp, weren't we? And we were going through reams of hemp, 20 different samples. And we found this. Yeah, found the one, you know.
Found the one I actually found years ago.
Found it years ago. Like, oh yeah, I know them. Yeah, sweet. Oh, great.
Give me that, because obviously we've been through a time where, and still to this current day, where there are a lot of other particle companies, a lot of people selling particle that are not even companies. They might just cook it up, let's say, in their own home and stuff like that. What is the difference, if you like, between other stuff that's available and what you guys have selected? Quantify that.
I'm not a top complete monster on Facebook, but I do like looking at it. I don't like Twitter for whatever reason. You see some of that advertising a load of, look at my particle, and you think, none of it's split. The hemp ends are split. I wouldn't allow it. I wouldn't allow it to be used on my lake.
Right.
You know, when people say they're going to do bait checks, if you looked at that, you go, sorry, mate, put it back in your bucket, take it home.
Yeah, because the connotations of that are it's harmful to the fish, isn't it?
And they don't understand. Like, I actually like most of my particle. I seriously overcook it.
Yeah.
Like when I used to actually fish a particle on a rig, or if I want to fish a particle on a rig, probably 2/3 of the way in, I had to take a scoop of them out to actually use as hook baits. Because by the time I finish cooking how I like them, there ain't going to be nothing that's useful as a hook bait. And that they eat it easier. It cooks the starches into sugars, turns starches into sugar, so they can digest it a little bit. I know they can't digest loads of carbs, but they can't digest starch, full stop. And so it's like working them starches into sugars, which is really, really important. And you see people selling it for silly money. You think, like, I've seen it sold per kilo. All right, you're going to get a lot of water goes into a kilo of hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so a kilo of cooked hemp is only probably about 400 grams of actual hemp.
Yeah.
Or even less.
Yeah.
But like, even then, they're selling it at less than our hemp we're buying is costing us. And we buy it by the tote bag. You know, it's like we buy it.
First order was a lorry, wasn't it? So
full lorry of hemp.
Packed in ton bags. Don't waste no money, mate. Put it in little bags. put it in the biggest bag you can.
Yeah.
You know, and like, and you see it and you think, it's not really what I'd want to go in my own waters. You know,
we carp
and it's not
anglers,
everybody.
we
Like
want quality
I
that
see
we-
some, and I buy from particle companies.
Yeah.
People that sell like from Hinders, people like I buy my own particle from Hinders because like we get it in mixes. If I ask Max, he'll get him to send me a bag, and about 6 months later, it might have happened. Yeah,
Digging you out here, mate.
Yeah, no, mate.
so I just go to Hinders because I know they're top notch. Buy it. Yeah.
I just say go to Hinders now. That's my response.
Yeah, they're the best people I know for dried particle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So quality.
But they know because they're carp anglers, Hassan.
Yeah.
So their sourcing is correct. You know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing, wasn't it, Gary? Is
Yeah.
that we looked at
Yeah.
what we would be happy with ourselves if we received that. And in addition, the difference is obviously the process.
And we have to also keep the consistency the same. You know, because like particles is like anything, it's seasonal.
Yeah.
If you buy a load of maples, what's just been harvested, it's going to be cooked different to a load of particles, maples what's been sat in a warehouse. You know, you even get that with the boilies, with the wheat and the semolina. You know, semolina's made from wheat. People don't even realise that sometimes. But, you know, fresh harvested wheat makes different semolina to grain store wheat.
Yeah.
So, and it makes a boilie slightly different. And so you're going to get that with a particle. So that's another thing with the test cooking, which we have a really good way of test cooking. You don't waste a full cook. You just put a couple of jars in. No, there's the quality and consistency as well. So we're buying seeds from, you know, we always try for the best price. You know, we've got, like Max mentioned him earlier, Pete. You know, he's our purchaser.
Particle Pete?
Yeah, no, not
everything, Pete.
Yeah, everything, Pete, mate. He's brilliant at purchasing.
Yeah,
he'll
fantastic.
scrounge. He'll do whatever he needs to get a bit better price. He'll make him feel sorry for him, or he'll be aggressive. Whatever it needs for each
You've got to be
individual
a shark
supplier,
with that.
he will get a bit better price, a bit better deal. If we buy a full lorry load, we're buying a full lorry load, we want it about a third off, mate.
Yeah.
Full lorry load. What about transport? He understands the whole logistics of everything.
He needs to get on my Tesco shop with me.
And he'll
Come
say
on.
like, oh, well, we're going to be doing this all year. So we can tell you that we're going to do a volume of like 200 ton or whatever. And then at that point they go, oh, because the salesman, their eyes light up when they hear what they're going to be getting orders for forward orders.
So we do buy as well as we can, but if it means we can go buy some rubbish what's cheap, we're not interested.
No.
You know, because we've got to then cook it and everything. We've got to work out how to do it. Once we've got the standard what we need to maintain that standard.
Yeah.
And you will get let down throughout the season. You know, I've had it before with things like, you know, we've had bird foods even what we sent back. I won't keep it in the factory because it's contaminated with whatever, with moth or whatever. So you've got to keep your eye on it non-stop. And like, you know, Max has got some good lads working in the particle side. And, you know, we've got one lad who's a keen fisherman. He's walking around with his eyes open and they're connected to his brain. And it's like, you know, it's really good. And you've got to be that
He'd be
sharp.
the first to ring and go, I'm not too happy about this. Can we have a look at it? You know, and then obviously then it boils down to literally the cooking process, doesn't it, Gary?
What is the cooking process then?
So if we're looking at testing, obviously it's quite a wide. You've got to get the ratio of the water to the seed. You've got to actually get to the end of it and know that it's cooked.
Yeah.
Because you've got to go to that point. And then in addition, because it is a sealed unit, you have to sterilise the product in the jar, otherwise it's going to go off.
Yeah.
So that means you've got to get it to 121 degrees.
Temperature and time.
Yes, temperature over time. So you have this thing, I could bore you with it, but basically it's called lethality, and it essentially means that you are killing the time it takes to kill all of the highest form of bacteria. Which
so you're not using any kind of preservative, mold killer, nothing like that.
But that's all from this unit that you've bought that basically does it all when you pop it in there.
You buy tins of beans. It's done similar.
Yeah,
You know,
they're done to a
everything's
regulation to stop people opening a tin of beans and killing themselves.
I feel like I've gone back to uni here with you two.
So then at that point, obviously the guys, we actually employed a chemical engineer who worked in the food industry. He did these validations, as they're called, to make sure stuff is safe for the food industry. So we took him on. He then it comes in with all these loggers. He puts pressure loggers inside and temperature loggers, so we know the temperature inside the retort under pressure for all that period of time. We then
in various points throughout the retort,
like literally like thousands of data points then get gleaned from it, and then we process them data points. And in doing so, we know lots of different variables like the fact that the time in which it's going to take to get to full lethality or the figure that we are happy with, so we know that it's killed the bacteria, and we can maintain that and report that should an authority want to see that. We can give them evidence of such. And then in addition to that, the fact that we've got a jar now, when you cook it in a jar, it expands, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's got to go somewhere, it's trying to get out. So we measured the pressure inside the jar, and then the retort, it basically gets mapped out with a sort of graph, I suppose it would call it, and that mirrors the overpressure on the outside.
So you don't blow up everything that's inside.
So if it's 4 bar coming out, there's 4 bar pushing it in, so it stays structurally integral. And that's between that and obviously these variables of the seed type. That's why it's really hard for us to basically just throw anything in. We've got to be as consistent as we can be.
The skipfuls of empty jars.
Yeah. We went through it for like R&D. We've gone through tons, but we've got the outcome of like the best geometrically looking jar that you can buy with the best fill level that you can buy with the best quality you can buy. So you've got the 3 like brilliant USPs of that product straight away. It's like I'm not going to be. We wanted to put our name to Particles, but not in like the half-baked way. It's like we're going straight down the rabbit hole with it, and we're going to come out with it looking good, and I think we're pretty happy with it, aren't we? So,
how long's that process taken from actually buying that through
twice as long as it should have?
You've had COVID.
Kev will tell you the same.
Not you've
Gary
had
will
COVID.
say that.
COVID's been in there, hasn't it?
Yeah.
As well. But how long's it taken? Give me an idea.
Over 2 years. I think it'll be getting on 2.5 years by the time we actually launch.
Right.
Yeah,
which
is
is
a long time.
We could have got them done outside. We could have got somebody to cook them.
That's what.
Roughly how we want them.
We had the jars would have been like that on the stand.
We had them cooked before outside.
Yeah,
I've been to several different retort places and seen them retort cooking and everything else. A bit of spying, bit of like if he comes up with the price, we might do it. And so the options are to get someone else to do it. Most companies get somebody else to do it.
Yeah,
but like. Then everybody's tied with the same. Everybody's is the same.
Yeah.
We didn't.
There's no standout.
We
couldn't
really want that.
Elevate the process. So what we can do and what we can map out, like with the pressure and everything, allows us to do really cool stuff with the particles. But it was a precursor to being able to do really cool things with fish liquids that haven't been done before, like actual natural products sealed and cooked in the jar to basically be used for fishing in the sense without. Like your typical having to put more sort of stabilizer with it or preservative or whatever, So it's neat, isn't it, Gary?
Yeah.
So basically, the range in terms of particles. Talk me through what we've got. Not liquids. We'll go liquids in a minute. Particles. There's loads, isn't there?
Yeah. So we got oily hemp.
Yeah.
We got your favourites. Oily hemp. We've got a creamed corn, which like I've mentioned earlier is like a blended sweet corn blend with sweet corn flavour, sweetener in it. And salt water, so it's nice and sort of salty as well, so it tastes nicely balanced. We've got a small seed mix, which is Gary's, the mix that you used to put together in pouches.
Nice.
Always going to be a winner, in terms of like it works. He's looked at these certain seeds for years and he's picked the best ones and made it into a blend.
Yeah.
And the same applies for the large seed mix. And the tiger nut slush, which was actually specifically milled for us. So we have the company in Spain actually
grows their own tiger nuts.
They grow their own tiger nuts for starters. And then we got hold of all the grades and made them a blend and said it's this percent of this percent of this. So we like got a nice cross section from like half and quarter bits all the way down to almost dust. So we've got a nice cross section of all of it for tiger nuts. Then normal tiger nuts or round ones, which we've had graded round. So they all catapult the same distance if you want to catapult them out.
So they all catapult the same distance.
Yeah, in your spod.
Yeah,
you're not going to be.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. But also they're enough that you can cork them and they won't end up splitting or anything like that. Just a perfect size for it. Like I say, maybe a bit anal, but that's how it is.
It's classic, isn't it? That.
But even
if you're going to cook it and you're going to cook it
mile.
and make it as good as you can, it might as well look as good as you can. Yeah, I'm terrible. Don't follow fashions or anything. I'm not interested. But people do look at things and
appreciate.
Yeah, it looks pretty. They buy it better.
Yeah,
it suits them better. It makes it nicer in their heads for it, doesn't
There's
it?
that commercial side. I get it completely. Yeah. What else we got?
And then the Scopex squid hemp.
Yes,
so that's
I've seen that.
Real blended squid with Scopex flavours in hemp seed.
Real
simple as that.
Squid.
Yeah. And we had to, even the sourcing of that, like Gary said, there's this stuff the sea fishermen use. It's called dirty squid. They all call it dirty squid. It's basically all the guts, eyes, the whole thing.
nice.
It's
The
not
whole squid.
nothing is spared. It's just chuck it in, and we made a liquid out of that, which essentially means you just throw in loads of whole squid
And it even
blend
makes
them.
a difference where the squid comes from.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, sea
And
temperatures and everything make a monster difference.
so Gary said about that as well. So we sourced Argentinian squid, full, whole, unwashed Argentinian squid.
Are you joke? This is different level, boys. Like when I've cooked carp, I've made sure it's cooked.
I've made boilers with squid, liquidized squid in it for certain people before, and we've found some squid are a lot better than others. So you don't just go to the squid shop; you go to the right squid shop.
Argentinian
And it's
squid
like,
shop.
yeah,
I thought I was doing a good
It
job
comes
just
in-
cooking me
it
an
comes-
emp, but this is
yeah.
different gravy, isn't it? Completely.
Sometimes
and the
you think you're
logistics
mad
of it
for
as well is mental. Like it comes in frozen solid blocks,
Right.
so it's all about the thaw time. Yeah, because you don't want it. It's no good to take it out on Monday to use it on Friday. You've got to take it out on Monday to use it on
Yeah.
Wednesday afternoon, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's all about the thaw time, and then you've got to liquidize it or semi-liquidize it. So we bought a machine for that, didn't we?
just the scariest
Yeah.
looking machine ever. But it's really
Yeah,
cool.
you don't want to fall in that.
It's really cool. Like the first day Gary got it, he's like, "Look, this is wicked." Turned it on full, and it's just going brrr, and there's squid going everywhere. But it was fun. We
It's
had a
how
laugh,
you
didn't
use
we?
it. It actually, it's like mechanical. It lifts in and out the big mixing vessels.
So yeah, we were
And I-
covered.
Because you can't just put it in the bottom and it just goes zoop.
Yeah. What about anything else in the range? Is that all the particles? I think
Yeah, so they come in a 0.5
And
and,
then
a 2.5 litre.
Yeah.
But even like we were saying about the sourcing, obviously Gary's got his perfect blend for the large and small seed.
Mm.
And we've managed to contact a farm, so we don't muck around with like these middlemen.
Straight
We
from
go straight to a farm, and the guy puts down for the UK-based seeds, certainly. He puts land down for us now. So like he puts down some crop for Nash,
the Nash
just
field.
so that we can farm it. So we've got links with, it's in Norfolk. So we're trying to be even as locally sourced as we can be. Tiger nuts are from
decent.
Valencia, I think.
Yeah, that's local.
Somewhere
Argentinian
local,
squid.
like Argentinian squid. So yeah, we've gone and really sort of pushed the boat out, haven't we? But
You got to
want
be able
the
to
right
sustain
stuff.
it. Over the years, I've made baits like stingfish mix years and years ago. Can't make it because you got half the
Yeah.
stuff is not available. Some of it's down to regulations, some of it's down to just pure logistics. You've got to make sure when you bring a range out that you can do it. I did that when I developed squid, and like we've been doing the scabbard squid now for years, and we still can do it. All the ingredients are always going to be available.
Yeah.
So it's you and we've done the same with the seeds. So we're just done the same as the seeds is a business, everything's a business, and you've got to make sure you know your business, and that's what we try to do.
Liquids. You said there something that's never been done before with regards to the whole liquids. Talk me through the range of liquids to accompany the particles, how you might use them, and why it is so unique.
so normally, especially like the smaller ones, that like your small fish, if you like, so shrimps, stuff like that, you buy them in a frozen block. You use them at the lake. You only use half. They're sometimes hard to get hold of, and then ultimately you probably throw the rest in the bin, or if you get it back in time, you refreeze it. But it's very much quite an inconvenient situation. Again, like I was saying earlier, with the sort of you have to add preservatives in, and you can't actually have that higher inclusion of these fish products in a liquid form unless it's like hydrolyzed or something. So then, as a result of that, you can't maybe keep them for long periods on the bank and use them.
Yeah,
So
the dead. So, like a live maggot is always better than a dead maggot.
Yeah.
So the dead. So you don't want to carry on processing them until they're not actually a shrimp.
No, yeah, of course.
So
They've got
you
a
need-
very short.
Yeah. So you've got to keep it. You've got to keep it as natural as you possibly can.
So we looked at the ways that you can essentially preserve it, if you will, with like for a long-term basis, sealed in a jar without obviously having
Losing
to put loads of gear with it that might detract from the actual aim, which is to attract the carp and feed them as such. And we looked at shrimps and everything that we thought was, in essence, stuff that will catch more carp,
Yeah.
Gary says sometimes as well, like, if you cook certain things, they're better.
Yeah.
It's like we cook our food and it tastes better. Eating a raw bit of steak is probably not as nice as a bit of steak.
Raw egg is pretty much you go in one end and out the other. You cook it and it's 80% or so bioavailable.
Yeah.
It's digestible. You can use it because the cooking process has changed it to be more edible. It's the same with some of the insect type things, and water shrimps and stuff like that. It's the same with some of them. So you're actually making it better for the fish as such. Not that the fish can read a magazine and whatever and understand this completely, but in your captures, it will definitely show, I'm sure of it. You know, there's nothing going to be a substitute for live anything. But like, you know, I've used dead maggots before, and like I find if you freeze them, is the best way. If you just let them die or put them in boiling water, I've never found scalding them with boiling water any good at all.
No.
You know, freezing them is the best way. And like, you know, we're doing it slightly different in that we're cooking them to be the best way.
But as you cook
and we will probably try because we're not, you know, we don't just stop at whatever. We spot something, we want to try that.
Yeah.
And there'll be things what we try what won't work.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so
there is one, isn't there, at the moment that wasn't working, that I'm literally pulling my hair out what's left of it just to figure out how I can do it, you know, because like you say, you get stubborn with certain things, don't you? You find these things
can't
that you
give
go,
in.
yeah, like I'm not taking that as a loss.
Another
Like,
machine.
yeah, that's it. And I think that's what sort of it breeds it as well. But also there's that whole, I want to be the first one to do that. It'll be really cool, and I know it'll work. So in the case of these fish liquids, we've looked at stuff that people like. It's well in the fishing industry, but also stuff that is very good in terms of what content it is. So in the case of the shrimp, you've got brine shrimp, so an Artemia. They feed that to juvenile carp. So they like rather as a substitute almost for the natural environment when they're farming them, and particularly in like recirculation systems. You've got Gammarus, which is freshwater shrimp. There's plenty of lakes with weeding with freshwater shrimp in, isn't there?
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
And then we found one called Mysis, which is microscopic, and it's a bit like a sort of a bit small. It's more of a microscopic organism, isn't it? A rotifer that you'd find in the sea. So you got a bit of salt, you got a bit of freshwater mixed together, you know. And we basically like it's in this liquor, if you like, and as it cooks under the high temperature, not only does it kill the bacteria that we need to, so it will stand on the shelf, but also it sort of extracts some of that goodness, and it's sat in that liquid, so all of it's good from the watery bit all the way through to the solid bits of fish that are in there, you know.
Yeah.
We did a mussel one, didn't we, Gary? We went through a couple of different mussel types to try and find. We basically just bought a load of mussels and smashed them up and went, yeah, that looks good. But we know that mussels are hugely sort of in the freshwater environment, you know. And again, like I think Alan took it to Orellana, like in Spain, like somewhere where they are feeding on natural foods, and he was massively impressed by it, like in terms of the way it caught lots of fish in a very big lake,
didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he said, oh, it's too attractive because I caught loads of small ones, Max. But I was like, well, you caught them, like they're natural feeding carp to a degree. You're never going to be able to satiate them with boilies in the lake that big. It's 30 odd kilometres long, isn't it? So it was really good, like sort of field test for that in the as natural as you can environment for carp. You know, we have one of the ones that was quite special, I'd say, and that took some sourcing, was the worm cell, which that came before, didn't it, Gary? I believe we were. This was before the particles. We were looking at this product.
Yeah, mate. I was trying to get that off you as a sample, but you weren't giving it to me. You were
that's gone. We've gone through the mill with that, and Pete again in purchasing, singing his praises massively. He basically spent time trying to import it. Obviously, since post Brexit, there's been import export, all that sort of thing. And he's having to talk to a guy in Vietnam who barely understands English to organise it. He's had to work with DEFRA so that we can get an exclusive import licence, which we're the only company in the feed industry that can get it.
Jeez.
And now we can get it into the country. And it's been a right nightmare in the last 6-8 months to get that to happen. But it all started with the fact that he basically makes a digestion or like a hydrosolate of pure earthworms, and he uses it as an addition to a diet that he fed shrimp. And that sort of resonated with me because Gary's like squid powder, the first one was fed to fish to get them an appetite stimulant, almost to get them going, to increase their growth rate and get them to market quickly. And this worm is exactly the same ilk, you know. So I was like, I've got to get it. And I spent like 6 months, 2 o'clock in the morning talking to him because of the time difference, trying to get the word in to get it sorted. And I got samples and it smells like a farmyard, doesn't it? It smells absolutely horrific. But it is,
but
it's really good.
But mate, that is good.
Yeah.
Definitely,
So it's a special liquid, and the worms they're in vogue, you know, like chopped worm is like the thing, and this is concentrated earthworm liquor, basically. Like you couldn't ask for a better, really.
Well, but the difference would be you get it in a little jar from us, and until you open that jar, it's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
When you've got worms, chopped worms, whatever, and you've left them in your bag or something like that.
Yeah.
The denaturing all the time, they're going off. Whereas like that's fine,
That's bang on.
and that bag there might not be.
Yeah,
and that's an
and some things,
as well,
some things can be, as big a repellent as what they can be a tractor.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
yeah.
That one's an exception in a way, because that one you don't have to retort. We just source that as a liquid, and it seems to be very stable, doesn't it? So, because we ran quite a lot of tests trying to blow it up in hot weather and all sorts. And
Did you? Yeah,
just trying to see whether we could make it
Still
turn.
got it on his windowsill.
I still have it on my windowsill, and it's fine. So, we wanted to maintain, well, at least have that one particularly. Like that one, you can use it pretty much for a good period of time, and it doesn't need to be sealed. It can just have the lid on, So
because they've not been tampered with and they're sort of secure, let's say, can you overdo the amount of liquid you put in or not?
No, I think like with anything, it's application. I think that's why we did them in a sort of 500ml jar, because obviously they are pure fish. You're not paying for sort of like the bulk ingredients, if you like, but they are a price point that's akin to a normal liquid sort of price at 500ml. But ultimately it was more because you want to, if you're going to open it, you've either got to freeze it within a couple of days, really, haven't you? Or you use it all. And 500ml over an amount of bait, a spod mix, if you will,
weekend
is ample, you know. Like selling them in a litre or 5 kilo would be actually like sort of be mismarketing, really. And they are the purest form of fish you can buy in a jar in a shop. So it's the same. The good thing about them is probably you won't have to put lots in to get a very good reaction out of them,
I'm sure you won't.
Yeah,
you won't, because they'll be hardly denatured at all.
Yeah,
heat denatures things, but like it improves things. They are sort of like, you've got a jar which is concentrated just shrimp. And like,
I know I'd want that. I want to use that all the time.
Mate, I've smelt them. I got them all. Like we were at the Northern Angling Show, and they were out properly, and I smelt them like all singing, all dancing in the jars and looking the business. That worm cell, mate, ridiculous. Like absolutely, you just know it's going to catch fish. You know it.
And we obviously got the squid as well. We did the squid liquid that goes in the Scopex squid.
Yeah.
We do a blended squid liquid as well. The dirty
Atlantic
squid,
squid. What is it?
Yeah.
No, Argentinian squid, isn't it?
Yeah. So
I look at squid in a whole different light after this, I tell you. Final thing from each of you. If I had to press you for a liquid and a particle mix of the range that you would back higher than anything, what would you go for? Even though you back them all, I know. What are you going for, Max? Give me a liquid, give me a particle. Or a
liquid.
Mix.
I really like the brine shrimp and Gamaris because it's got loads of big bits of shrimp in.
Nice.
I like that. It's really good.
Particle to go
particle, with it. Creamed corn for me because of just his sweet corn, but better.
He's definitely said that 3 times, guys. So that is definitely a winner.
It's definitely my favourite.
He loves a bit of cream corn.
Sweet corn's good anyway, but you can make sweet corn better. Like you can make maggots better with flavourings, like Gary's mentioned. Like there is sweet corn with that extra bit of power.
Lovely.
Large seed mix and the worm.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, that sounds big carp, doesn't it?
That
compared
screams
to my
big
little,
carp.
my little.
No. You've got bites. He's got like
that's kind of how we work these days, isn't it?
It's good.
Gary goes somewhere really hard and tries stuff, and I go somewhere that I can get a few bites in the morning and go.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Boys, it's been an absolute education. I feel like I've gone back to school there and learnt an awful lot about particle. But the crux of it is it's out there. Get yourselves on the particle. These guys have worked really hard on it and they've not scrimped in any form of way.
Look at my hair. I had loads before.
You just ripped
2
it
years
out.
ago, I've just given up,
Mine was black.
I'd love to see. This is a man who's not dealt with particle, and I'd love to see Nash's bill for the whole sort of build and everything else that's got into it. But there's been an investment in the whole area, mate, and it pays. But thank you for sharing the information. Thank you for bringing it to everybody. Thank you guys for watching and listening. I'll be back soon with another Nash Off the Hook podcast. But until then, boys, thanks for the knowledge and big love to the whole particle range. Thank you for coming in,
mate. Thanks for having us.
No problem.
Cheers, guys.